Oh, here we go. We are live, leading theologically. Season whatever, 2022. This is Lee Hinson-Hasty. I'm Senior Director, Theological Education Funds Development with the Presbyterian Foundation. That is a ministry of the Committee on Theological Education, which, Rachel, we just finished meeting. We're on a board together, and the board that I serve, the Committee on Theological Education, just met the last 3 days. Sadly, we had to move it from face-to-face to online, but they may be listening out there too. Anybody who's here, we'd love to see you in the comments. Let us know you're here. And today I'm talking with a newer friend of mine, but someone I hope is a lifelong friend, the Reverend Rachel Penmore. She is the director of UKirk in Knoxville, Tennessee, the University of Knoxville, and others involved. Thanks for being here, Rachel, making the time right here in the middle of the semester. You know, big Florida, Tennessee, Florida come to town. Lots of orange.
Well, that's my hometown. That's my hometown team. So bringing them here, I'm trying to hold them in my heart. I told my students I was going to wear a clergy collar and a Florida shirt on Friday just to freak everybody out, so they would want to yell at me, but they couldn't because I was wearing my clergy collar.
Right.
But we'll see. I don't know if I'm brave enough.
Well, make sure there's does the director of UKirk National have like a security detail?
There should be for competitions like this. There really should be.
I'm sure you're out there protesting too.
Right. I think I'm in the vast minority. So
right.
I think I'd be overpowered pretty quickly.
Well, before we got on here, everybody, we were talking about the fine line between Tennessee orange, Florida orange, and University of Texas orange. So if anybody has,
and you have Maryville orange. Maryville orange is a different. Maryville orange is a different. Well,
no, there's the Maryville orange. Yeah, my dad was a football coach. Maryville College just down the road, not quite the powerhouse. And I'm not going to mention that there's a team that wears orange in South Carolina. I'm just not going to mention
that one too.
Yeah. Okay, we're not here to talk about football. We're here to talk about young adults in church. Y'all need to know Rachel is such a gift to the church. We're on the UKirk National Collegiate Ministry board together, and she is really qualified for this. I'm not sure about me. She already mentioned from Jacksonville, Florida. She has a bachelor's in religion and philosophy from Queen's University in Charlotte, a master's of divinity. She went from East Coast to West Coast to San Francisco Theological Seminary. She has served in contexts where she's engaged young adults, I think primarily in Yellowstone National Park, at Travis Air Force Base, in hospital chaplaincy, transitional parish ministry, and now with UKirk. Thanks for being here. I could say a lot more. Married. She's a spouse. She has that covenant. She's a parent of a young child. She's a kayaker, a hiker, a frisbee thrower, a dog parent. And thanks for being here, Rachel, again, and all the gifts that you bring. I want to ask you, as I often ask my guests here, almost always, is what is it that is making you come alive? Because clearly you are coming alive in beautiful ways.
I'm glad it's coming across that way, because my kid's in a sleep regression right now, so I don't feel very alive. But, oh, no. But as far as ministry goes, what is and kind of continues to come alive isn't necessarily a big kind of piece, because what COVID and pandemic have really taught me is to really pay attention to the smaller pieces. And I feel what makes me come alive is when people feel known. When I'm interacting with my students or with other folks and they feel seen and heard and known, because I think that's something that we all have lost in this pandemic, is a lot of separation and a lot of ways that we are missing connection with each other. And when you're able to feel safe in someone else's presence, because we haven't had each other's presence for a long time, and feel safe to bring the fullness of who you are and who you are becoming and who you are discovering into that space. And when I feel trusted with that. And I know that is something that takes work to get there. I leave those moments just feeling alive, feeling like that ministry has meaning, because it doesn't always feel that way. Sometimes it's moving tables and picking up food and buying 80 cases of cheer wine. And that's
cheer
ministry.
Wine. Oh, cheer wine. That's me. That's a draw.
Yeah. There it is. Now you know where I am.
I feel seen in her.
Anytime we can bring cheer wine back into the conversation.
All right, this is not officially sponsored, although we'll take sponsors.
It could be.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I haven't heard anybody say it quite that way. There is some invisibility and sort of silence that happens, from being kind of pulled out of into private spaces more than public spaces. And I could see that you're somebody who notices. So what are some practices to help you see and hear and recognize and name? What are some practices?
Part of it is I'm an empathic person, and so I'm always scanning the room. I'm always paying attention to just kind of see where everybody is, what are kind of I've done a lot of study of body language and all of that. So I'm always paying attention to what are the subconscious ways that people are telling me how they're feeling. But something I learned
usually more than the words, right?
Always more than the words. People say so much with their bodies, so much with how they say things. It's just oftentimes the words are really secondary. And a skill that I learned working in the hospital setting is that I usually look for the person who is not the loudest in the room, because they're the person that may need the most attention. I'm always trying to pay attention to that piece of who is getting missed, who is not included, or who is just not sometimes the loudest kids are the ones are able to express themselves differently and able to, be heard. Sometimes this is not always the case, but I do often try to pay attention for who is the quietest person in the room, who is not making the most amount of noise. And I just, more often than not, it's about the ministry of presence, of just sitting next to somebody and letting them know that you see that they're there more than anything. We just want to be remembered and noticed. And I think that is part of this gift of ministry is noticing people, and also noticing when they're not there. We all want someone to say, hey, I noticed you weren't there. We missed you. This community is incomplete. There is the parable of the lost sheep. A friend of mine told me a reframing of it, it's the parable of the incomplete community, and that community was incomplete. It's not about this one lost person. It's about this community isn't complete without you. And so that's part of how I try to approach each person that I interact with in ministry, is that you're going to make our community different and better and more unique, and sometimes a little weirder, but we're just a bunch of weirdo. My friend calls it, we're just a bunch of weirdos all flopping Godward, and it's so ungraceful and it's so messy, but when we do it best, we all acknowledge that. So
you're say that again. You're
flopping Godward. So you're just, like how a fish flops or whatever.
Oh, right.
You're just kind of
flopping around,
because it's like faith is such an ungraceful process.
Right.
And we all think for some reason that everybody else is doing it well and better. And we're all just getting up every day and hoping we're flopping in the right direction.
Yeah. Right.
It's just
exactly.
It's just a messy, beautiful process.
And only it's kind of by grace do we sort of flop into the right direction.
Right.
I see the executive director of UKirk National Collegiate Ministries, who both Rachel and I are fans of, Jenny Norris Lane. Thank you. Parable of the Incomplete Community. It's true. Flopping Godward. She heard you. Flopping Godward. Okay. Now see, I don't, I did live in East Tennessee, a long time ago.
I know. I often forget how the kind of Southern nature until I'm like telling my daughter to stop doing something. And I'm like, no, ma'am, we don't do that.
No,
It's like, I grew up in Florida, which is essentially a subset of New Jersey. And it's like,
right.
I did not get an accent till I moved to North Carolina and Tennessee.
Yeah, right. Well, my North Carolina's been influenced by Kentucky, so I mean, we're getting there though. We're getting there. You're cross cultural, intercultural. What do you mean when you said that about remember? Who's not there? That's a practice too. It feels like, and one of the places where we worship weekly, we have weekly communion, and we often sing the words of institution. And the words of institution have made a whole different impression on me, remember me, the whole kind of remember me. When I'm singing that, I'm like, everybody's singing that. I want them to remember me, remember Jesus, remember me too. I mean, like, let's remember each other in the body of Christ. I mean, that's what I hear what you're doing. I think that's great Christian practice. How do you remember? I mean, I take pictures and selfies is one of the things I do, which is a little crazy. Are there ways, how do you remember and notice and not forget? Especially, I mean, I like what you said about not the loudest person in the room, and I'll take that metaphorically, not the most prominent person, right? That's showing up over and over in a social media feed or very prominent on campus or around town. I mean, how do you remember them and not forget them? I'm thinking this all has to do with young adults in church because they're not showing up, right? This is all.
Well, they are, but it's different. I think the misconception is that showing up in church is Sunday morning in the pew at 11 a.m. for an hour. And that isn't the best time for everybody. Like Sunday morning or Sunday is where you're getting ready for the week. You're doing laundry, you're meal prepping, you're doing tons of things. And Sunday morning is not always the most convenient time for folks to worship. And so they are showing up in other ways, in book studies, in coffees, in all kinds of other ways. So I think them showing up looks differently. For us here, we worship Wednesday evenings because that is a time that class isn't happening, that most of the time we're past the time of clubs, and they can be here. This is a place where they know they're going to get a free food. They just did a study in the SEC, and 1 in 3 students are food insecure. And so knowing that one in 3.
Third?
Wow. So the idea that they know that there will be a meal here every week, and there's, we keep food around all the time for that, but they know that there will be a meal here, and there will be no pressure worship service where they can come sit in the back, and we won't force them to participate any more than they want. And it'll feel similar to a worship, traditional Presbyterian worship service. It has all the elements, and it's got this level of grace that applies completely to them. But also I feel it of, when I forgot to take communion and I throw a piece of bread in my mouth and start choking on it, and the only thing to grab is the cup. And so just swig back some grape juice, and they're just dying laughing. But it removes kind of the holier than thou. It just makes the whole thing accessible of this is just bread and juice. And these are things that sometimes go down smoothly and sometimes we choke on them.
Exactly.
Yeah. But to your question of remembering, it's just a lot of work of showing up and paying attention. And they slowly start to give me pieces. And when they give me something that is theirs to hold, that's precious. And it's on me to remember that, to follow up with it, to check in with them on it, and in ways that doesn't single them out or call them out in front of their friends or whatever, but just, grab them and be like, hey, you were telling me you wanted to get hooked up with a counselor. How's that going? It just something that says, I heard you and I need you to know I'm walking this with you. And I think the remembering is reminding them that this whole thing that they're figuring out, their life, their faith, their personhood, their identity, isn't something they're walking alone, that somebody sees them and knows them and cares enough to just pop back in and be like,
right.
How's that going? That breakup was really hard. How are you navigating it today? Did you eat today? Have you had something other than coffee today? It's just the basic things that we all need. Like sometimes I have to text my husband when I'm out of town. I'm like, do you have lunch today? And he's like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot. And it's just,
right. Breathe, please breathe, keep breathing.
Right. We just all need that. And it's, it's a huge part of ministry. It's just that basic checking in, catching up, remembering what's going on with each other.
Well, and that seems like that. I mean, this is not some simple formula for anybody, but the young adults that are in your life that you encounter, and it feels like you do this for anybody, but especially for young adults, sort of noticing those things about who they are, if they're into, what they're into, how is it going with, that thing that you care so much about, maybe it's they're an athlete, or maybe it's, the book they saw them carrying around, or, it could be anything. And especially somebody who's not just in their family. That seems like that makes a lot of sense. I mean, this is where we can be church for one another. Maybe it's something you read about them in the news. I mean, not the newspaper anymore. You read somewhere else about them. You hear about them. What's your take on social media with this? I mean, does that help, hinder? Probably both, but is there ways it can be helpful, do you think?
I think there are. I don't love participating in social media, although I am required to. I currently have. Yeah. It's not really my thing. But currently I run 4 social media accounts. So I run our coffee shop, I run our ministries. I have a professional account, and then I have a personal account. And my students all covet the day when they get to graduate college and follow me on my personal account, which is, that's fine. I think for some of them, social media is a clue for me. If I know that they are super active and I notice that they're not, that's a clue for me. And it helps me know kind of the fullness of who they are, what they're doing, what they're into. But part of this demographic, this like 18 to 35, I think is what they classify as a young adult, this is the time that has some of the most amount of change that your life, and it's increasing now that people are going to college less, now that jobs are rotating and changing, and families are changing, how we're doing, like just the amount of things that are changing and impacting this 18 to 35-year-olds. They are figuring out identity. They're figuring out who they want to be in the world. What are they interested in? What's their job? Do they like this job? What's happening with their family? What's happening with their relationships? Some of them, for some of my students, they're learning their gender identity for the first time and acknowledging, there's just this unbelievable amount of change. And social media first gives you access to lots of people that are also doing that, which normalizes some of these pieces. It does create, kind of an unhealthy that a lot of people are doing this great and well, and nobody's struggling through anything. But what's interesting is that my students are really into something right now called Be Real. And it's all about taking a picture of what you're doing right now. It's all about being real, and they love it. They're trying to get me on it, but I don't know if I can handle another social media.
Is it another social media?
It's another thing. And it just gives you a notification, and you just take a picture of what you're doing right now. And it's just all about not curating it, not filtering it. It's just, where are you? What are you doing right now? And that's, I think the popularity of that speaks to our want for authenticity that we do. I love Instagram because I like watching cookies and cakes get iced, and I like watching dogs be adorable. And it's something really soothing to me about those things. I follow a lot of dog accounts, but there's something about this kind of craving for just that everybody has a bored moment at their job, that everybody is for my students, that everybody's struggling with midterms or goes to the dentist, or these things that we
Right.
don't take pictures of. And this invites that authenticity.
Yeah, there's some accountability in that also.
Right. Right.
I mean, if this shows up, in the middle of something that you don't want people to see,
Right.
I mean, there's that's okay. I see we got somebody saying they love Be Real. This is the first time I heard of it. See, this is why we do the show. We learn. My grandmother said I could learn something every day. I've learned. I'm already learning a lot. Friends, thanks for being here. If you have comments, questions, we'd love to hear them. Wherever you are, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, let us know who you are, where you're from, and what you're thinking about. Rachel, I'm wondering, to kind of theologically, what guides you and how you are this kind of ministry with young adults. Is there scripture? Are there theologians? Are there kind of systematic principles? What is it that sort of makes this theological versus just sort of a good group process, or whatever? I don't know. What is it that really prompts you, sort of a plumb line, if you will, for you?
For me, it's baptism. Okay. And I say this when I go to churches to talk about my students, and just in my entire encounter with young adults, this is a critical time of faith where you're trying to figure out who is God, independent of what my parents believe and independent of how I was brought up. Who is God, and who is God in relationship to who I'm becoming? And when we baptize babies in our church, we say, as a community, I will love you and support you on your faith journey, which is more than just that one baby in your church that that applies to all of these kids. And especially when they come to college, and especially when they're in their mid-20s and they don't know how to make friends, and they're struggling with jobs and relationships and all kinds, that is when we need to come alongside and say, your faith is a part of this and it's important. So let me walk with you as you're rolling around in these questions and deconstructing and reconstructing and figuring all of that out. Because when I said that to my own child and to the kids of the church that I attend, I meant it for all of the children of the church. And if we are all children of God, our faith life doesn't just become static and stop. It's a part of the whole journey. And so we owe that to each other to continue to affirm those vows by supporting these young adults as they are figuring out their faith. Because if the church doesn't do that, then we're not making space for them and expecting them to fit a model that doesn't exist anymore.
Right. And the church doesn't do it, who's going to do it? Right. Listen, you and I knew we were already on the same line, but I think you may or may not know how key vocation and call is to my own call and baptism. I mean, I think it starts in those waters, which are chaotic, right? They're chaotic. I mean, it's hard. It's not all just splashing like a bath, the kind of things.
Yeah, very little of it is. It's mostly just it's like being in the ocean and you get knocked down by a sleeper wave and then you stand back up and you're catching your breath and another one takes you out. I feel like faith feels like that to me.
I think this is true. Somebody out there can remind me. I think in American Sign Language, baptism is like this. The thumbs, two thumbs up, then it's to the side and up. I mean, this is like a death dealing thing, only by grace, risen to new life. And you are clearly a person of that grace, welcoming, guiding, pulling those people out of the water. That's what I see. And sharing that and encouraging others to do the same, because you can't do it alone. We can't do this alone.
And something like some people, it feels like this assumption that we should be able to, and it kind of has siloed us in a lot of ways, especially post-pandemic. But good Lord, do we need each other?
Oh wow, yeah. I hope. I mean, that is definitely true. Our time is waning fast, but if there are questions or comments you have for Rachel, folks, you may not know this. She has a board. UKirk Ministries across the country are primarily self-supported in one way or another. And, we're just really grateful for the ways that those are supported, and UKirk National Collegiate Ministries, which we serve on, helps us, is an association to resource all those organizations. But get to know your UKirk leaders out there. If you go to, I think, is it ukirk.org? Is that right?
It is. Mm-hmm.
And then your website, UKirk, UTK. Make sure you get the K in there.org. You can learn more about Rachel and her ministry and connect there. Really exciting. So what's coming up that people may not expect? I mean, folks may not have heard that there is a coffee house that y'all run, UKirk, right?
That's right.
What else is coming up for you the next few weeks?
We started a program that has like a name that I'm kind of obsessed with, that I actually had a student come up with, called Liturgy Lanyap. And lanyap is a Southern word that means to enhance or to add to. And since liturgy means the work of the people, this is our way of enhancing the work of the people. And for us, it is sitting around, and my students can write down any question they have about God or faith or religion or theology, and we write them anonymously, and we put them in a cup, and we pull them out one at a time and talk about them. And the ways that they are thinking, that we often don't assume that they are, is really just this really enhanced work of the people. And so I'm just like, I had a student, it was called Theology Chats, and I was a student who said, can we call it Liturgy Lanyap? And I was like, I don't know what that means. But he wrote me 500 words on it about why lanyap was this thing. And so
I'm thinking that's going viral.
I love it.
You better like copyright that name and get the website now.
Well, I'm happy to share it, because it is an amazing ministry model that requires zero prep on the minister's part, and tells you exactly where your folks are. And really, I mean, it's steered my sermons. It's steered kind of what we focus on, because it's what they're interested in.
Right. Literally, what people have questions about, and maybe ones that they're not ready to say publicly, or they feel uncomfortable, but they can do it anonymously. I think it's a great thing. Okay. So that happens like once a week?
Once a month.
Once a month. Okay. All right. That's sort of the deep dive, but that sounds, I'm ready to show up. I may have to drive.
Folks are welcome.
All right. I may learn something. Well, friends, I think our time is coming to a close. I like to be on time if I can. Next week, normally we're every 2 weeks, but we're getting started fast here. Next week, I'll have with me the Reverend Dr. Jose Irizarry. He is the new president of Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary, formerly with the Board of Pensions as their VP for Education. Some of you did Credo. That was work that Jose was about. He was a Dean Director at McCormick Seminary. He was a dean at the seminary in Puerto Rico. Just a real gift. He's an artist. He's a singer. He's one of these people, Rachel, that just has all these gifts. He's amazing. And I think he collects children's books too, which is a great way to answer some of those theological questions. Sometimes good children's books. So Jose is going to be with us, transitions and starts in ministry. Hope you'll join us for that. We have a great lineup this fall that we'll be publishing. Stay on the lookout. Subscribe to the podcast, to the all of our social media feeds. Kenda Creasy Dean from Princeton is going to be with us. Keisha McKenzie from Auburn Theological Seminary. We have the co-moderators in December are going to be with us. Isn't that awesome?
Buckle up.
Buckle up. Yeah, Siobhan and Ruth. And they're talking about theological education, by the way, something they really care about. So we're going to have a lot of fun this fall. Hope you'll join us live or later or on the podcast. Love to hear your suggestions too. Before we go, though, thanks again, Rachel, for the gift that you are. Clearly in your baptism, God has called, named, and claimed you to be a gift in the place that you are right now, where you are literally pulling people out of the water into new life. And it is a gift to the church. And we see you. We hear you, we notice you, and we will not forget you. And would you share a prayer with us, please, a charge as we go?
I'd be happy to. Gracious God, send us out into this world to be awakened and enlivened and surprised at where you are already at work and where you are calling to us to join in. Wake us up, breathe your spirit into our weary spirits, and remind us of who you have called us to be. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, everybody. We'll hope to see you soon. Peace.